Hello, and welcome to the Turchin Center for the Visual Arts virtual ARTtalk series. I'm Christy Chanowski, Director of Arts Education and Outreach at the Turchin Center. We're located on the campus of Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. I'd like to acknowledge that the land we work on is land traditionally owned by the Cherokee people. I say this as a way to remember the story of our community and to stand alongside our Cherokee neighbors. We at the Turchin Center are committed to providing engaging and educational content to accompany our dynamic art exhibitions. While current health restrictions have changed a lot about how we present our work, it has not changed our mission to engage learners in and through art. We hope you find our virtual content inspiring. Thank you for taking the time to engage with our work and with other art supporters who, like you, are inspired and uplifted by the visual arts.
I'll go ahead and introduce our artist this evening, Christina Lauro, who is a paper artist creating installations and two-dimensional art. She originally studied fashion design at Cornell University. She then studied fine art at the University of Maryland and SUNY Brockport, earning a BS in studio art in 2009. Laurel's artistic mission is to create an exhale moment, an oasis from the sensory bombardment of today's world. Her Refugium and emergent installations were developed during several artist residencies at ArtRes, Virginia Center for Creative Arts, Cambridge Center for Creative Arts, and Paducah Arts Alliance. Christina has participated in a multitude of solo and duo and group exhibitions in galleries, museums, and venues in South Carolina, North Carolina, New York, Kentucky, and Georgia. She now resides in Liberty, South Carolina. So thank you so much for being with us tonight, Christina.
First of all, I want to say a big thank you to the Turchin Center for Visual Arts team, both former and present, and that's Marianne and Craig and Aaron and Gabrielle, Shauna, Lynn, and Christy. You all have done a wonderful job with executing my vision. And while this was intended as an immersive sort of real life experience installation and is now mostly virtual, still you have maintained and conveyed my original intention. And so just a big, big thank you. I'm going to begin my talk with 4 questions to myself. One is why paper? The other is what's the motivation behind this installation? What is a refugium? And what is my creative process? Why paper? Why paper? I love the tactility of paper, the ability to manipulate it. I don't make paper, I manipulate it. And I love Japanese paper, washi, because it has a lot of flexibility and durability. My major was drawing on paper, of course, and I was thinking about one of my earliest memories with paper is paper dolls. So, okay. What is the motivation behind this installation? So in 2009, I began making suspensions. I wanted to get the art off of the wall. And the first one I made was a walk-in kimono, and we will see an image of that a little later. But this was a singular experience, one person walking in and being surrounded. So I made a conscious decision with this installation and the butterfly cocoons that they would not be walk-in, that they would instead be, there would be a multiple grouping of them, and people could ambulate in and out. And this offers the potential for a more communal experience. And for me, and the intention really is that this is a refuge, this is an oasis, this is a place where when I walk in, I feel subsumed, I feel safe, I feel the words, embraced and just I can exhale. So the next question is, what is a refugium? A refugium is a specific environment outside of which a species cannot survive. Now, if you Google refugium, you'll get a lot of references to aquariums. Now, granted, aquariums are specific environments for fish in order to survive. But I took this concept and of course, expanded it and made it more inclusive and metaphorical. What is my creative process? For me, it's threefold. It's concept, it's time, and it's materials. So years ago, it was brought to my attention by E.O. Wilson, who's a biodiversity scientist, that even butterfly species are either extinct already, on the brink of extinction, or are endangered. I know there's been a lot of attention on the monarch right now. At any rate, this fits in with, well, honestly, it was not a really huge leap for me to go from the butterfly to our species. And all three of my nature motifs that I utilize in my installations, the butterfly, the ginkgo leaf, and the lily pad, benefit other species, including our own. Of course, the butterfly is a floral pollinator. The ginkgo leaf detoxifies the air, which is why you'll see it planted in many urbanscapes. And the lily pad detoxifies the water and also provides shade for the fish. So that's concept. Time. Well, in retrospect, I have discovered that it takes me about 2 artist residencies and several years in the studio to have any of my installations come to full manifestation. This one started and evolved over 6 years, but of course, the most intense amount of work on it was done in the past 3 years. And then there are materials. So in 2013, an artisan who makes shoji screens here in Greenville, Bob Ripley, walked into my art studio, looked around, and then turned to me and posed this question: have you ever considered using shoji? And that one question has led me to where I am now. Okay, thank you. So this is a little bit of the evolution of the suspensions. 2009, this is a kimono. This is a walk-in kimono. Once again, singular experience. This was at SUNY Brockport. This was kind of interesting because I had been working on the kimono in the 2D format, and I wanted to bring it back to a 3D without being literal. What I discovered in the process of investigating is that the kimono is made of strips, very long strips of fabric that are sewn together, strips that run from the front over the shoulder to the back. So basically what I did was I deconstructed the kimono in order to reconstruct it. I used a lot of found paper, pattern, like tissue paper that you use with sewing patterns, just all kinds of things. I was really in a very exploratory phase with this. Next slide, please. Okay. Then around 2011, and this is a solo exhibit at the Red House Art Center in my hometown of Syracuse, New York. And I started playing with, I shouldn't say playing. Artists have they say, oh, artists just play. Well, started working with those temporary paper shades. And for the 2D work, I would reinforce the back of the paper shades with a thermally adhesive interfacing, and then used mixed media on top. But for the sort of columnar pieces, I just started wrapping them around these armatures. This one I think is an embroidery hoop with metal armatures, wreath armatures. And one of the things I discovered with this that I really like are the cast shadows. Okay, so the folded paper, in fact, you can see way up at the top, there's a butterfly, but there's also, origami and others. But I like the cast shadow. And unlike the walk-in kimono, these are not walk-in, but this one I made so that it could freely rotate. It's suspended with monofilament and freely rotates, which is also a feature in the cocoons that are in the turchin. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the Rochester Contemporary Arts Center in Rochester, New York in 2011. I called this small installation Ethereality. You'll see in the back one of the very first cocoons or beginnings of cocoons. So it's lace fabric, and once again circular. I sewed it into this shape, and at that time I was using found paper and cutting it into butterflies and actually sewing them, attaching them by sewing them onto this. That was really fragile over time. So anyway, but I find it interesting to go back and go, I see it beginning. Next slide, please. Okay. My first artist residency was with the Paducah Arts Alliance in Paducah, Kentucky in 2014. And I was experimenting once again with more of these cocoon shapes. In the far background, and you'll see another image of this, is a walk-in suspension. But then if you move up, I don't know if you can see the gray. This is a gray, it's almost like a taffeta. It's a polyester die-cut fabric. And I kind of want to point. I have to stop myself from wanting to point this out. But at any rate, I started attaching, at this point, had discovered, of course, the shoji paper. And I started attaching shoji butterflies sort of in a spiral around this, and left it at that point. But once again, this is the evolution. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is the walk-in suspension. It is constructed of, I believe I used a hula hoop, or maybe it was plastic. No, it wasn't the hula hoop. It was, although I did experiment with that too. It was acrylic plastic tubing. So I wrapped that, and it's paper mesh that has been sewn together in strips and layered, and in between the layers are the ginkgo leaves that were die cut at that point. And then anyway, it was just interesting to watch people's responses. Little children just wanted to get under there and twirl, but adults would go in, and some just, it looked like it was a meditative and joyful space. Next slide, please. Okay, 2017, the Spartanburg Art Museum in Spartanburg, South Carolina, put together an exhibition called Paper Worlds. So at this point, I had 3 cocoons, and these 3, well, the one that's most illuminated in the center is pretty much the same as what is in the current exhibit here. But the other 2, I actually reworked totally. I took off all the butterflies and reworked it. And by the way, well, we'll get around to that. I hand cut all the butterflies. The other element that I introduced into this exhibition were what I call totems, because I was thinking of how can I get these to come almost like stalagmites and stalactites, having a textural element that will rise from the ground up. I used wooden stools as an armature, and the one that's a detail on your right, there are butterflies on the interior as well as the exterior. Next slide, please. Here we are. So I went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 24 cocoons. And I know that, oh gosh, I just love the way Craig and Aaron install these. It's just wonderful. Okay, I guess one of the things I can say about this is that, for example, I chose not to have all of the butterflies and the cocoons be white. And I wanted diversity there. I wanted tonal areas. I wanted focal points so that you could go in and really be curious and want to explore and be there and walk in among these. Next slide. Okay, so now this is a little bit about the whole process. Japanese shoji paper. This particular paper, well, I use 3 different kinds of paper. One is a shoji that is infused with polymer, which makes it even more durable, and then another weight of shoji that is not infused with polymer. And I also use rice paper. So I start out, I order my rolls from a wonderful little company in Wisconsin. It's 37 by 84 sheet, and I start tracing. And my business card size template that I created, and each sheet yields about 600. So it's hand traced and hand cut. Next slide, please. Okay, the cutting. Okay. I finally settled on 3 different styles of spring-loaded scissors. I was trying to prevent repetitive motion injury, but it does take 12 individual cuts per butterfly. So that gives you an idea of how time-consuming it is. And yes, I broke the springs on that one. Pour that one out. Next slide, please. Okay, attaching the butterflies. In addition to I really loved the gray die-cut fabric. And it was one of those items where it was discontinued. I couldn't find it after I enjoyed it so much, enjoyed working with it. But then I thought, okay, I can move on and to lace fabric, which I source. Is usually vintage. And what's kind of fun about lace too is that the motif is usually has botanicals, vines, even sometimes butterflies that are woven into the fabric. So it seems totally appropriate. It also allows for translucency, which I really, really like too. So somebody said, how many butterflies are on a cocoon? I don't know. I don't count. But I know there are hundreds and as many as 1,000 on each cocoon. So I will start attaching them with these mini scrapbooking brads after I've also hole punched the butterflies too. Next slide, please. Okay. But after a while, I have to move from horizontal to vertical. So a wreath armature supports the fabric cocoon. I've devised some hardware and then it attaches with monofilament. These range in height from 4.5 to 7 feet. The width is about 1.25 to 1.75 feet. So they're at a human scale. They're at a human scale, and I really, all of my installations are at a human scale. It's important to me. The other thing that I do is I find that so many of my projects involve a bit of sewing along the way, because I sew the cocoons. But then I also have created a seam, an opening, so that I can reach my arm inside in order to secure the flanges of the brad, on the inside of each of the butterflies. But then I have to be able to close up the cocoon. And I found that sewing on very small clear plastic snaps, about 2 dozen per cocoon, works. And then I can close it up and hopefully disguise it, and you will never notice it. Next slide, please. So sometimes people ask, well, what did you do after that? I actually worked on some 2D work, but then I took one of the paper shade pieces, and this is one, and this is from 2011. So here it is a decade later. And I thought, oh, let's see, this one already has butterflies on it. And I have some additional butterflies that are of a different palette than the one that is used at the Turchin. So I just started attaching them, and they're just swarming all over this piece. And I just love the fact that it's taken, once again, this piece in general, it spans a decade. But swarming, I realized, is an activity that we are not encouraged during the pandemic to do. So, but the butterflies can swarm. And there we are. I think that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Christina. It's so lovely to get a little bit of insight into your process and hear about what you're up to. So your work is, steadily expanding in terms of the space that it takes up and the degree to which the viewer can fully submerge themselves in the experience of really being with your work in a space, from, as you showed us, your 2D works to the larger sculptural pieces, and even the pieces that viewers can step inside, to the entirely immersive experience at the Turchin Center. Can you talk a little bit and expand on your choice to work on this, as you call it, human scale?
Well, I really don't want, I don't want an installation to overwhelm or underwhelm. And because it's meant to be a refuge, an oasis, I want it to be calm. But once again, and maybe you have experienced this, that when you walk within, just bodily movement, sometimes air movement, or if your shoulder brushes against one of the suspensions, they move. And it's never frenetic. It's very gentle, or sometimes just the heat or the air conditioning will move the air, and they will be in this lovely, what I think of as lyrical motion. Now one of the things was that originally I did intend for this to be the ADA compliant 3 feet, between each cocoon. But then when COVID hit, I thought, well, my goodness, there's no reason I can't make these socially distant at 6 feet. And so they are, and they work at that distance as well.
Yeah, I did a tour at the Turchin Center with a group of app students, and they spent so much time in the installation looking at each cocoon and lying on the floor for a long time.
I love that.
It was really lovely to see the work in action, beyond my own experience of it by myself. So that makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Thank you. That's an example of that, in a way, communal experience that that this allows. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a question from Keith Bryant, who is a previously exhibiting artist at the Turchin
Great.
Center, who wants to know, does the monochromatic color choice have meaning?
Hmm. Hmm. Just once again, to make things diverse. I don't know that white is the color choice of everyone, but neutral tones, pale tones, um, even dark tones. Every person resonates with something different, and I didn't want it to be, a rainbow. Anyway, so in the sense of just it wanting to have, as I said, diversity and some focal points. Part of it, I was thinking, I do love monochromatic installations. They're very interesting. For example, I was sharing with my husband last night. I pulled up Carlos Amarellis, his black cloud. He does these swarms of butterflies that are individually attached, and depending on the venue in which they're showing, they'll be swarming up on the ceiling and the walls and all of that. But the sensation that is created is almost polar opposite to mine. The sensation, I asked my husband, I was like, okay, so how does this make you feel? And he said, ooh, creepy. And I said, yeah, it has a disturbing quality to it. But I still, I can appreciate that. Whereas with this, I really wanted it to be a peaceful, an oasis, and yet be of interest. So you don't just say, oh, they're all white. I've seen one, I've seen them all, and you dismiss it. I wanted to engage.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's very clearly successful. We have a question from Robin, who wants to know, where is your next exhibit, and will it also be Cocoons, or are you working on something new?
Next exhibit is actually some 2D artwork. It's a group exhibit in the fall. And it's a group of artists who are also cancer survivors. So doing that.
Amazing.
Uh-huh.
That's lovely. Can you share a little bit? You briefly mentioned it, but can you talk a little more about your inclusions of the subtle references to your previous artwork in this installation, and kind of the ways that you do that and what you think those references evoke in the work?
Well, they make it totally mine, that's for sure. What I did, I have a 2D piece that is a butterfly wing, and the series that I did around that was called Remnants, which in a way has to do with how, you probably many people have experienced finding a butterfly wing, on the ground, which is both beautiful and sad, but still, it only takes a piece to connect to the whole butterfly, and its beauty in totality, or its beauty in partiality. So I had done a collage, and I used that and reproduced that digitally, and but it's in color, and more like the pieces behind me. And I wanted to just, once again, I went to the, printed it out in black and white. So that is the only imagery that is on these pieces, is that one piece of artwork. So that makes it totally mine.
Nice. You did mention Carlos Amarellis. Are there other paper and installation artists that you're inspired by?
Yes. Yes, there are. Jacob Hashimoto is an artist who uses paper kites, round, I guess they're a Japanese version, a round paper kite. And he does multiples of these and arranges them. I welcome people to, look him up. Very, very interesting. Judith Gregory Olsen, who exhibited at the Turchin in this very same gallery and who uses tea bags. Once again, a very fragile, beautiful, subtly beautiful source of material to use, and she does wonderful things with them. So she's also somebody. But I have to tell you one an artist who is not a paper artist and was probably the very first installation that I ever saw, which it's James Hampton. And this is, he has an installation in the Smithsonian. I'm just gonna, I have to share this little story. If we have time, we good? Okay. Yeah, because I would also encourage you to look him up. And I'm gonna look at my notes because I can never get the total title of his installation. But here's somebody who created something in his garage after working all day as in a federal office building in Washington, D.C. as a janitor. And he took discarded pieces of furniture and light bulbs and just, oh gosh, all kinds of cardboard, cut out cardboard, a lot of things he covered with aluminum foil. And it's interesting, he lived in a house with his sister, and the sister had never been in the garage until after his death. When she opened that garage, it'd be like something out of a movie, you know. So the installation, this was done between 1950 and 1964, and was truly, to me, the penultimate like labor of love. And it is called The Throne of the Third Heaven of the Nation's Millennium General Assembly. So yes, lots of inspiration everywhere.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
We have a question from Lori who wants to know, how are the cocoons transported without crushing the butterflies?
Okay. They're transported on mobile clothing racks. So they hang within their own protective plastic cocoon when they're in transport.
That's so inventive. We also have a question from Peter Petschauer who says, in Japanese culture, the color white means party. Does that resonate with you?
Oh gosh, no, I didn't even know. Means party?
That's what he says. Yeah.
Okay, like celebrate?
Like purity.
Oh, purity. Oh, I thought you said
Computer
party.
corrected my word. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, purity. No, but that's a lovely connection. Thank you.
We have another question from Elizabeth Bagwell, who says, I know some of your butterflies in the past had featured the images of your 2D work on the paper, and wants to know, is that the case with any of the butterflies in this exhibit? And I think you may have touched on that.
I did touch, yeah, I did touch on that. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we might have a close-up picture in this slide.
Yeah, that would be of the darker ones, or maybe, I'm trying to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So COVID-19 has affected so many artists in so many different ways. How has the pandemic affected your practice?
Wow. In a way, I was grateful to have this installation to work on for the past year, and it really gave me something positive to focus on. It definitely slowed all of us down, and gave me lots of time to think and be grateful. I also took about a month to sew face masks in the early phases of everything, for hospitals, etc. So we're not there yet. And it's interesting, I can tell you another way that's affected me, which is I've started some 2D work, some new 2D work, and all of the faces have masks on them. I wasn't planning that, but it's emerging. So I thought, well, I'm not going to start on a whole new series right away. And yet I think I'm on a mask series. So yeah.
That is really interesting. Kind of shifting gears to your process, why is it so important for you to cut out each butterfly individually with so many technologies that could assist with that aspect of the process? What is important about doing them by hand?
For this installation, it did feel very important. It's such an investment of myself as an artist, to do it by hand, and I really feel that there's the energy, that, and the effort is, it's an activity that it keeps the whole installation alive. I feel that I hope that you can feel the energy that, and hopefully it will sustain and carry with the installation wherever it goes. But the other thing about the butterfly is, one, it's asymmetrical. Marianne Redding had noticed that. I had brought a few samples when we first started discussing all of this, and she held it up and said, "Oh, this is not symmetrical." And I said, "That's right, and that's intentional." And we're not asymmetrical, but yeah, it is important. I did do a separate installation using the ginkgo leaf, and I had a grant for die cutting those, and I did. But I've also cut just as many. I had an original 1,000, but I have also cut just as many by hand.
Yeah, it is so impressive, and it definitely encourages viewers to like really tap into that more reflective and meditative state, especially when they know that you've done it by hand. And you mentioned one of your elements of your process being time, and I think that commitment to the process really imbues the work with that sense of time. But I wonder, do you like to think about specific things when you're tracing and cutting and designing these pieces, or is it more of an open meditation?
No, it's honestly, sometimes it's just very contemplative, as some repetitive activities are. And sometimes it was, I mean, in all honesty, there's a little bit of tedium, of course, that comes in that. But I never tire of the butterfly itself. And I guess that's part of, I love all three of my nature forms. Yeah, but mostly, no, just, it does give actually an openness in the mind. It allows for new concepts and new ideas to float in and out, and that's good.
Yeah, I can imagine, and especially since it's over such a long period of time. I know as an artist myself, once I am working on a project for a long time and I go to it, it kind of becomes easier and easier to drop into that process.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, so you did talk a little bit about this, but I wonder if you could give us a little bit more about what makes the shoji paper in the installation more workable and sturdier than some other Japanese papers, like maybe made with kozo or gampi, just for those of us who don't know too much about
Yes,
paper.
exactly. In fact, there is a wonderful video. It's quite old, but Sekshi Banshi. It's a province in Japan where they make, and there's a video that shows, at the artisans cutting the plants, the fibrous plants, and then beating them and boiling them and parsing out all of the fibers. So and then having it in a water mixture where the fibers can interlace and kind of naturally weave into each other. In a way, it feels almost like working with fabric. It has that quality. For something like the rice paper, in order to make, now rice paper is not made with rice, but we won't go into all that. I would sometimes coat it with a product called Ink Aid, which makes it both stronger and more receptive for the inks.
Yeah, that is amazing.
So I would encourage people to just go and online and look and see what traditional. Now a lot of papers these days, as I understand it, in Japan are also machine made. But to go and look for videos that show the traditional time-honored process.
Right. Yeah, and in working with such broad motifs, such as the ginkgo leaf and the lily pads and butterflies, which are all things that most folks can connect to or likely have a personal story about, do you find that viewers like to share those stories with you after spending time with the work? And is there a story that someone has shared with you about their experiences of butterflies or any of the others that kind of stick up in your mind or perhaps bubble up as you work? Or do you have any your own stories that you'd like to share?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it is. It is a real connecting motif, any of the three. In Paducah, I was focused on the ginkgo leaf, and I was directed to, the ginkgo trees that were around the perimeter of the bank parking lot. People know where the ginkgo trees are in their environments. People have also had people who have been to Mexico to see the monarchs cluster, after their migration, have told me that these very much are evocative of that experience for them. And I have not done that, but I'm happy to hear that. I had one acquaintance who this is kind of segueing. I'll come back, but I love watching people's responses. And one of them, she said, I want to be buried in one of these. I want to have this as a shroud. I was like, wow. I've had people come in and they want it as a lamp. But I said, no, this is not a lamp. But in terms of a really touching story about the ginkgo leaf, is that when I was at Hambridge on an artist residency, and I shared the ginkgo leaf motif with what I was doing, and then the way it works at Hambridge and a lot of artist residencies, you don't go visit each other's studio unless you're invited or you make an appointment. So another woman, a writer from Michigan, came, and she showed up at the door, and she had in her hand like a pink, I don't know, Chanel perfume box or something. And I thought that was curious, but I wondered what was in it. What was in it was an actual ginkgo leaf. And she told me the stories that on the morning that she was leaving for the residency, this ginkgo leaf had blown from her neighbor's yard onto her doorstep. And it was just sitting there on her doorstep as she stepped out, and she picked it up and she put it in this box, and she brought it, and she said, I have no idea why I'm bringing this to Hambridge. And then when she saw what I was working on, she said, this is for you. I know now why I brought it. And I get chills every time I think of that.
Yeah, I did as well. That's amazing.
Yeah.
About all of the synchronicities.
Yes.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So I guess my last question is, what do you hope viewers will take away from seeing the work?
Wow. Perhaps a memory of the installation. And maybe they can go there and re-experience their feeling of when they were in this installation, or imagining being in the installation, and probably notice butterflies more as well. But it isn't just about the butterflies, and just to I don't know, just appreciate and and take the time and the space every once in a while to find some quiet from our sensory bombardment. But I do want to share one more thing, Shauna, if I have time, which is when I was in Paducah, and I was starting to think about oases and refuge and all of that, and sensory bombardment and the quiet. I thought, well, you know, some people live in very quiet settings, like out in rural areas, or, you know, maybe they're not in a big city where, you know, there's a lot of noise, and some people like a lot of noise. And I thought, well, even if it's not sensory bombardment from the external world, there is our internal world. And our thoughts alone can hmm, cause us a reason to seek refuge and oasis. So I guess that's what I hope that people take away.
Yeah, that is lovely. And I know I definitely felt that when I've been in the exhibition. And I just want to remind everybody that you can see the walkthrough video again of the work in the gallery. And that link is in the chat, and to the exhibition website, where you can see additional images and more information in the video as well. And we'll also be emailing all of the registrants for this talk a special recording of Christina in the gallery. So thank you so much, Christina, for so graciously sharing your time and your work and your insights with us this evening. And thank you to everyone here for joining us and for sharing space with us on this digital platform. It is really nice to celebrate our exhibiting artists and connect around their work and continue to cultivate community in these new and exciting ways. So be sure to check out our upcoming art talks on the Turchin Center's website, and Christy will drop a link to that webpage in the chat for you. Thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your night.